Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania, believing that God is doing wonderful things through us. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, your host today, and welcome to you, and also welcome on the program today, Pastor Peter Asplin, who serves the Bethlehem Evangelical Lutheran Church in Scenery Hill, Washington County, here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. Peter, welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Tony. It's good to be here.
We're glad to have you. Tell us at the beginning here just a little bit about the congregation and the community and the area in which you serve.
Bethlehem is a small rural congregation. We have about 85 people in worship on a Sunday, and our church is actually located about 8 miles outside of Washington, Pennsylvania. It was placed there in 1791, so we're one of the oldest congregations in Washington County, and we're in the perfect place that you would want to be in 1791, but we're a little off the beaten path now in 2011. But it's a great congregation with a great bunch of people, faithful people who gather weekly around Word and Sacrament and who try and do the mission of Christ in the world. The county is pretty rural where we live. There's parts of Washington County that are pretty built up, but our part is not. There's lots of farms. In fact, there's a donkey field across from the church with 7 or 8 donkeys in it. And so, you know, you drive to church on Sunday morning and you see sheep and donkeys on the way there. So it's very pastoral. Most of the folks in the congregation work in town, doing various things. We've got lots of nurses and teachers in the congregation, lots of people who farm part-time and work full-time. So I know a lot about folks who make hay every summer, twice during the summer, but they work full-time along with caring for animals and making hay and things like that. It's a part of the county that has had a lot of mining activity. In fact, the church was built 100 years ago. The building that we have now was built 100 years ago with coal rights money. And between that time and now, lots of coal mining was done. Down to the south of where the church is, about 5 miles, is a little community called Marianna, Pennsylvania. And the Bethlehem Mines Corp., which was part of Bethlehem Steel, placed a huge mine there in the early part of the last century. That mine had a huge fire in the early 80s and was closed at that point. And so what was a booming community of middle-class Americans gradually has declined into a community of rental housing that's far from anything and far from jobs, and has become pretty poor and pretty in need. At this point, the downtown of Marianna has 2 bars, a bank which is sticking it out with us, and one little store, a post office, and the Marianna Christian Outreach. And that's what I'm here to talk about today.
And we're glad that you are. Good. And it's good that the faithful have a place to gather, whether you're in the city or the suburbs or out in the country. It's good that the faithful can come together, and also good that they can do some wonderful ministry, as you have mentioned, the Marianna ministry. Tell us a little bit about how this came to be, please.
Well, about 18 years ago, a woman named Marva, who grew up in Marianna, had taken a new path in her faith and had been working in a clothing ministry in the city of Washington. And the more she worked in that ministry, the more she realized that the folks that were starting to live in her community needed this kind of ministry. And so she talked to her pastor, and they started a ministry where they gave away free clothing to people who came in the front doors. And for 15 years, she and her church, which was Nottingham Christian Church, which is about 20 miles from Marianna itself, worked to take in clothing that people no longer needed and give it out to people. And they did that for about 15 years. But as time went on, the number of volunteers that were trucking down from where Nottingham was to Marianna, which you can't get there from here, so it's tough, it started to decline. And in the last couple of years, it was Marva and 4 or 5 friends from the Marianna community. And they were not really able to maintain the ministry the way that they had for the first 10 years. And Marva was in her 80s and really felt like it was time for her to close that chapter of her life. That was certainly a fair decision, and both the congregation and she were ready for that. But it turned out that 2 ladies from my church were not ready for that. They were both horrified to hear that this ministry, which they felt was more vital today than it had been when it was established, was going to close. And so they came to me and said, "Pastor, we should do something." And I thought, well, that's a crazy idea. But if you want to try it, we can try it. So I met with their pastor, and we met with Marva. Carol and Chris and I met with Marva, and we looked at the space. We talked to the landlord of the space, and we thought, you know what? We received some bequest money that we could use to make this possible for the next year. The original church volunteered to contribute $100 a month towards the expenses. Marva promised to make sure that we knew what was going on. And so we brought it to the congregation and said, we think God has called us to take on this ministry, to be about the ministry of clothing the naked, of providing clothing so that people don't have to spend money on clothes for their kids, but can spend it on food and electricity and water. So if we can take the burden of clothing off of them, then they'll be able to do other things with that money in their lives. And this is how much we think it'll cost. It runs, we thought about $4,800 a year to run this ministry. It turns out to be closer to $6,000 with having to maintain the interior of the building as well as the other expenses. But we told the congregation what we thought, and that we have a pot of money to draw from if we have to. And people made commitments, financial commitments, of $50 or $75 a month to make this possible, and the congregation voted yes. And so we found ourselves down there scrubbing and cleaning and organizing and resetting the place. Luckily we had a relationship with the County of Washington, and so a work release program that they run came down and painted the interior for us and helped us insulate the back room. And really got it changed up and brightened up. And we had a wonderful reopening celebration, which we invited the community to, and it was pretty exciting that day. We started off pretty small. People would come in, about 20 people a day. And then over time, we've been doing this now for 3 years, we've gone from 20 people a day coming in to get clothing to 40 people a day. We're open 3 hours a day, twice a week, from 9 to noon, Thursdays and Saturdays. So, one of the other great things, of course, is that people who are aware that they have more stuff than they need now have a place to bring their stuff to. And so people bring us their clothes and their toys and their Christmas decorations, and we take them in and organize them and sort them, and then we give them out to people.
It's good to see that a good ministry that at one point was thought perhaps to be on its way out has sort of experienced this rebirth. And we're going to hear more about that. If it's okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back here on Lutherans Alive.
Great.
Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're continuing our conversation with Pastor Peter Asplin from Bethlehem, Scenery Hill, Washington County, Pennsylvania. We're hearing all about the Marianna ministry, which has been primarily a clothing ministry, but there has been some growth and expansion. Can you say some things, please, about how the ministry has grown and expanded since its rebirth?
Sure, Tony, I'd be glad to. there's two main, there's three main missions of our ministry down there. One is simply to, week after week, provide clothing, appropriate clothing, summer clothing in summer, winter clothing in winter, to folks. But then an additional two things we've done is we do a distribution before school starts at the beginning of August, and we give away backpacks and school clothes to kids. We try and gather as many school quality tennis shoes and school quality jeans and school quality shirts in as many sizes as we can. This year we had 73 families come to the 2 days that we distributed clothes on and backpacks on, and we served 151 children in those 2 days. That's 6 hours, 151 kids. The kids get to come in and shop for clothes in their size, and then choose their own backpack out of the supplies. And one of the great things is that people from not just Bethlehem Church, but people from throughout the Marianna community, from the other churches of the area, the Methodist churches in particular have been very supportive, and the Disciples of Christ Church brought backpacks down. And we had more than 150 backpacks, so every kid got to choose a backpack for themselves out of our selection. So that's one big event we do. Another big event, which just happened last week, was our Christmas distribution. And in that distribution, we give away 2 Christmas gifts, plus socks or underwear, plus books, plus a stuffed animal for each child. And then something that we do that almost no one else does is we also provide a gift for every adult in every family. And most programs don't care for adults, but we do, because we think adults are valued by God, and so we value them too, and we want them to know that. And so this past Christmas distribution, we had 120 families come through, and we served 256 individuals within those 120 families with gifts, which comes close to 2,000 gifts. And we had everything from hair bands for stocking stuffers to 2 full PlayStations, PlayStation 2s that people were able to take, and a bread machine, which I had my eye on, but was better that it went to someone else. One of the neat ways that our ministry has expanded has been the volume of things that come into our ministry is huge. Bags upon bags of clothing. And so what we've found is that we can share that incoming stuff with other organizations and other ministries. And so the 2 local theater troupes have received props from us. When we spot something that we think will work perfect with one of their shows that's coming up, we send it to them. We've provided gifts for an elementary school that was trying to gather stuff for some of their foster kids who needed supplies, and so we provided that. We've sent lots and lots of materials to the local senior centers. When we get in stuff that you can knit with or patterns for clothing, the senior centers have really enjoyed those type of craft items, and so we've sent them on there. And hardcore medical items sometimes come in from families, tubing and other medical devices, and we've been able to send those to the Washington City Mission, where they actually have a nurse who comes in 3 times a week. So she's able to use medical supplies that we don't feel comfortable giving away in appropriate and important ways. And so we've really started to help not just the folks that we see come into our doors, but larger numbers of folks. One of the neatest things that has happened is seeing families come in who really are in need. We've had folks who just moved into the area from out of state come in who have nothing in their homes. And more than once, someone has come in and said, we just moved into our apartment, we moved here from Florida, we got a job working on the gas wells, and we don't have anything. Do you have any beds? And the next day a bed will come in, and we'll be able to call them up and say, it turns out that we couldn't help you on Thursday, but we can help you today. Another thing that's happened is we see probably once a quarter we'll have a woman come in with her kids who's lost her home and whose husband or boyfriend abandoned her and went from having a solid home and a solid life to having nothing 2 days later. And we've been able to provide, and we actually set back what we think a family will need, sheets and toiletries and kitchenware, so that someone who all of a sudden has nothing but yet has a family to care for can come to us, and we can provide immediately right away sheets for her beds, and we can provide dishes and pots for the kitchen, and she can take care of her family the way she wants to. And we do that at least once every quarter with someone who was abused and is no longer being abused. And that's really meaningful, especially for the volunteers. You know, it's nice to help people who are struggling to get through life, to give kids clothes, to give adults clothes, to give people work clothes. But boy, the sight of someone whose world has come crashing down and knowing that we were really able to make a difference in that person's life, you really feel like you saw Christ present in that room when that happens, and it makes such a difference for my folks when they see that. It's a gift that God has given us in the midst of that, and something I appreciate.
A simple idea such as a clothing ministry has expanded to affect people in so many and such a variety of ways, and you know, as you say, lives come crashing down even to participate in the healing process is a tremendous thing. And I can see how that would impact not only those who are being ministered to, but those who are ministering. And as you say, Christ's present in the midst of that. And how have your volunteers, how has your congregation grown? What have you learned through the whole process?
Boy, there's so many things we've learned, but I think the biggest thing we've learned is that God will provide. This year, for our Christmas distribution, we had 600 individuals sign up to receive gifts. Last year, we had 320. And so there was abject terror among the volunteers. And for myself, too. I was terrified that we had all these people signed up, and how were we going to serve them? But then what happened was we started opening the boxes that we had been setting back for the whole year, and God was providing. God was providing toys, and God was providing clothes. And God inspired 5 or 6 or 7 individuals to step forward with monetary gifts so that we could go out and, you know, the biggest problem for gifts for families is teenagers. No surprise there. And we don't get gifts for teenagers through the things we receive from people's homes. So we were able to go out and buy many gifts to support the teenagers that we serve through our ministry. And so we started with terror and ended up once again recognizing that God provides in the midst of this world, truly.
Just like the loaves and fishes, somehow there is enough.
There is.
Wonderful. More about the Marianna ministry with Pastor Peter Asplin after we're going to take just another short break here on Lutherans Alive.
Great.
Hi, welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're glad you're with us. We're here with Pastor Peter Asplin from Scenery Hill, Washington County, talking about the Marianna ministry and what a wonderful thing that seems to have been in your area and how it's affected, again, not only the people who are being ministered to, but the people who are doing the ministry Can you say some things, Peter, about the volunteers that you're working with there?
You know, we have, like most church ministries, we have a group of core volunteers from the congregation who work well together and who organize and put in many more hours than I ever expected that they would to making sure this is successful. But what has happened over time is that in addition to those volunteers from our congregation, as time has gone on, members of the community have stepped up. And we have 2 or 3 members of the community who come from the Roman Catholic Church in Marianna, St. Thomas Plunkett, who've started to volunteer with us. And they're there every week. Every day we're open, making sure things are organized. And then in addition to the community members who've come, we've started to have some volunteers who were clients begin to come and support us and spend time sorting through clothing and household goods and getting them organized on our tables and folded nicely and putting the wrong season back and putting the right season out. And that's been a great joy to see how God has inspired them to become closer to us and closer to this ministry, and has given them the gift of serving as He's given it to us. That doesn't mean it's always been easy. Some of those folks are not people that we're used to having in our church, and sometimes things can get a little tense in the back with people taking different perspectives on the clientele or on the donors, and so we've had to work through those kinds of issues. But I think one of the great things that's happened, even when there's been difficulty, has been that we as the people of God have been able to witness to how we deal with difficulties as the people of God. And that's been something we've been able to teach and to recognize. So my volunteers have been able to say, okay, well, we really want to welcome you, but we really have to toe the line on how we treat each other. And, you know, as people of God, this is how we treat each other. And that's what we need you to do. And sometimes it's hard to say that, but boy, what a difference, and what a ministry to provide to folks, to say, we value you, and this is why we treat you and treat each other that way. And so help us by treating others the same way. And that, I think, has been something that a couple of the volunteers needed to take a little while to absorb. But I think they're really learning about God through us in that way. And I think that's a gift for me.
We know that certainly there are a lot of good organizations in many places that help people in the community, a lot of charitable organizations. But we as Christians, we try to remember the why. Why is it that we do what we do? And as you spoke earlier, you mentioned that sense of calling, and that this is indeed a divine calling from God, that we have this mandate to love neighbors, to care for neighbors in need. And as we do that, we also love and care for one another and treat
Right.
one another in a way that is different, so to speak, than the way
People are sometimes treated outside of our ministries.
exactly.
And we really try and show the truth of that to the volunteers and to the clientele, to know that, you know, you may be treated poorly at work or when you go to the grocery store, when you're using your benefit card, but you're not going to be treated that way by us. You're going to be welcomed and treated with respect no matter what. And we have had a number of folks who sometimes they are doing very well, sometimes they're very put together, sometimes things are going wrong in their lives and they're very disorganized. And we've had someone who's had a pretty significant mental breakdown and been incarcerated, and we've tried to make it clear to her that she's always welcome, and we love her even in the midst of the lowest that she's been, that we still love her. And I think that made a difference to her, to know that, you know, we would provide our ministry to her even in those times where so many other people in her life were rejecting her, that we would provide our ministry to her. She was a special lady, the lady I'm thinking of, and I don't want to use her name, but she knew that when she walked in the doors that I'd be there and I'd help her get clothes, clean clothes, and that if she needed it, we'd even let her change those clothes in the restroom so that she could walk out looking better than she did walking in. And that really meant a lot to her.
To treat others with that same dignity and respect, and even with forgiveness, knowing that we're all sinners, it's what Jesus would do. And you're carrying that out there at Scenery Hill and in Marianna, and a lot of good things happening. A lot of good things.
God has blessed us. God has blessed us over and over again.
Keep up the good work, and may the Spirit continue to be powerfully at work there at Scenery Hill and Marianna. Peter, thanks so much for being on the program today.
I was glad to be here, Tony.
Thanks. And thank you for being with us today on Lutherans Alive. We know that from wherever you are watching, most likely there is a Lutheran congregation in or near your community, and those Lutherans would be very pleased to welcome you. Won't you come and worship with us? And won't you join us next time on Lutherans Alive?